Hello, class. Professor Mandeville back. We're going to do a lecture today on some things that occurred in the 1700s that set up the American Revolution, besides that century of conflict, which ultimately ended in the French and Indian War, which had a huge impact on, as many historians would argue, causing the American Revolution to take place. So, a couple of side notes here. You're going to notice that some of the lectures from this point forward, I recorded back in the spring when we went remote for my in-class History 101. And in that class, we're using a different textbook. So sometimes I'll be referring to page numbers that aren't in your present textbook. I'll go on and try to make changes and notate some pages that you're going to want to refer to in your present textbook. Give me liberty. But a couple things that I could point out right away that you'll notice in the Revolutionary War lectures coming up that I recorded in the spring. There's a really great Revolutionary War chronology in your present textbook, Give Me Liberty, on page 181. Then there are maps that replace the ones I referred to in those spring lectures regarding the Rev War in the North and the South on pages 209 and 211 in Give Me Liberty. So, what I want to start talking about today is something that's commonly known as the Age of Reasoning. And it's a time period that really changed Europe, but it had a tremendous impact on what went on here in the British colonies. And what happened here to change everything, a big invention which changed the way that humans, especially in the Western world, viewed just about everything, was when Galileo invented the telescope. When we could gaze out into the heavens with detail, it's going to break down a lot of premises that our whole thought processes were based on, which was basically superstition and myth. So, one big thing that comes as a result of the advent of the telescope. When you can look out into space, you immediately, after, trial and error and scientific study, you determine that contrary to what especially Christians had been taught by the church for centuries, that the earth was not the center of the universe. And in fact, it wasn't even the center of our own small solar system, which was just a small part of a much greater universe. Now, as I mentioned, for centuries, religious leaders had been teaching that, God created the earth, the earth's the center of the universe, and everything revolved around the earth. Well, no, it didn't. So when that was discovered and made, common knowledge, people started to question everything. Now, we'll talk about the effects on organized religion that, that this questioning had. But, they just started questioning everything around them. And this is when, it led to the advent of gravity being discovered, which changed everything also, and really led to what we refer to today is using the scientific method to figure out why natural phenomenon take place and learn more about our natural world, instead of just superstition and myth. So let me give you one example of how that changed everything. All of you have probably, no doubt, heard of and read about, maybe even studied, Halleys Comet. Halleys Comet is a comet that orbits on an orbit that passes close to the Earth every 76 years, like clockwork. Scientists today obviously can predict when it's going to start appearing in the sky and when it'll disappear every 76 years. Previously, religious leaders used to use this to scare their followers and tell them that basically the sky was falling. You humans have sinned too much. You've made God angry, and he's sending a fireball to destroy the earth. So you better hurry up and repent. Then that supposed God-sent fireball would barely miss the earth, and the religious leaders would say, you're lucky this time. You better not chance it again. You better follow what I say and what the Bible says, or God will send another fireball to destroy the earth. Well, obviously, people figured out that was myth, nonsense. So, in another way that this affected our societies in Europe and here in the colonies, political philosophers started to think very differently, sort of trying to incorporate laws of nature into their philosophical writings. One famous British philosopher who was definitely influenced by the Age of Reason was John Locke. John Locke wrote about how all humans are born with a set of natural rights. And you're familiar with these natural rights, whether or not you really realize they were John Locke's thoughts or not. And according to John Locke originally, they were life, liberty, and the pursuit of property. Now, later on in 1776, Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin will change that phrase. They'll basically paraphrase Locke in the Declaration of Independence, but they'll refer to it as life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Because you need to remember, the Declaration of Independence was also a recruiting tool to get more rebels to join the cause. And they didn't want to alienate people who were not landholders. So that's why they changed pursuit of property to the pursuit of happiness. So John Locke also was the one who really questioned the existence of monarchies, kings and queens, since he believed in his philosophical writings that all human beings were born with that set of natural rights. Why in the world are there a select few that are supposedly born with way more rights than the rest of us that makes them part of the royal family, kings, queens, dukes, duchesses, and so forth? He dismissed that as being nonsense, and it smacked against his idea of humans having the same common set of natural rights. Now, the next thing I want to talk to you about, as far as how the Age of Reasoning had impact on religion in more detail. We can see how people started to, dismiss the religious leaders once they knew the earth wasn't the center of the universe and Halleys Comet wasn't a fireball from God and whatnot. So what's going to happen to a lot of religions, there's going to be a mass exodus of people leaving organized churches. And, a lot of people had been more than likely looking for an excuse to not just follow the orders of the clergy, especially if you were a Puritan. Puritan clergy had a tremendous amount of power. We talked about the power to even exile people like Roger Williams and Anne Hutchinson. And, they dictated policy to their followers. A lot of people were just looking for a reason to say, I don't have to follow those rules anymore. So you're going to have people leaving organized religions. You're also going to have a new religion emerge known as deism, Deism, or the followers of deism were deists. Now, what deism is all about is sort of a combination of organized religion and the age of reason and scientific method and study. Deists still clung to the belief that there was a supreme being or a God, but they believed that God just set nature into motion and then stepped back and let the laws of nature take their course. So really, it was sort of a combination of the age of reason clinging to some of the old premises of their past religions, so you could still say, yes, I believe in God, but yes, I believe in the scientific method. This is going to force a lot of organized religions to really react. One way they react is through the creation of some of our great colleges and universities in the colonies and in then later America. As you may well know, Harvard University was created by Congregationalists, which were offshoots of Puritans. William and Mary College in Virginia was created by the Catholic Church. Princeton University was created by the Presbyterians. And what these organized religions were trying to say is, hey, you can have room for both in your lives. And you can even go to an institution of higher education and study theology if you want to, or you can study, chemistry, astrology, astronomy, not astrology, and other scientific pursuits. So there's room for both in your lives. You don't need to completely dismiss your age-old religion, and you can still be an educated scientific person. Now, another reaction that churches had to this, really the massive, exodus from their churches, and remember, an organized church is only as strong as the number of members they have. And if they start losing membership, they start losing strength. So, what happened here is a period in religious history in the colonies known as the First Great Awakening. And this was an effort by organized churches to bring people back to their organized religions. And the way that they did it was you had the emergence of numerous what are known as evangelical ministers. Now, I like to refer to the evangelical approach as trying to inject a little entertainment into religious ceremonies and meetings and so forth. So, for the first time, for example, let me explain to you what it was like previously, especially for a Puritan. On Sundays, which was supposedly their day of rest, Puritans would attend church from sunrise to sunset, taking breaks for meals, but that whole day would be nothing but listening to their clergymen preach to them about the Bible and be involved in deep prayer and thought. Now, when evangelicals come around, they're going to try to, I suppose you could say, lighten things up a bit. They're going to start having song at these religious events. And what a lot of them would start holding was things known as tent revivals, trying to revive their religion. So they'd pack people in for a weekend. They'd have feasts, so they supply free food. There'd be song, there might even be dance. And people would actually start to enjoy themselves and have fun instead of being glued to a hard pew for 12 hours like the Puritans were on Sundays. Now, this becomes quite popular during this Age of Reason, and it's really going to reach its height in the 1740s. And one of the most famous evangelical preachers of the time was Reverend Whitefield, who used to be able to pack them in for these tent revivals. In fact, in the 1740s, he held a tent revival outside of the largest city in the colonies, Philadelphia. Philadelphia in the 1740s had a population that was closing in on about 20,000. During that weekend revival, it was estimated that 10,000 people came to hear Reverend Whitefield and see his great tent revival. That's quite an amazing turnout when you think about it. So, the Age of Reason really changed everything in the Western world and in the colonies. It made us rethink religion, obviously made us rethink our superstitious explanations to everything, made us rethink the entire political process with great philosophers like John Locke and Montesquieu, and really had a tremendous effect on the colonies. And you can see how, especially the ideas of Locke with life, liberty, and the pursuit of property or happiness really influenced the American Revolution. Now, I'm going to call it quits for this lecture right now, but what I'm going to pick up next, after I take a short break here, we're going to talk about somebody, a colonist, who that basically could be the poster boy for the Age of Reason. He was the Age of Reason all wrapped up in one person, and that's the amazing Benjamin Franklin. So I'm going to take a break. I'll be back with the lecture on one of my favorite colonists, Benjamin Franklin. See you soon.